Many of you do know I've been expressing a lot of different sides of me through social media. I've been recently enjoying posting every day on my Instagram specifically. My Facebook, I do not have any friends to name of. However, I still have some of you that seem to like to keep up and check on what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, which is cool with me because that's what it is there for. The thing is, I have lived in Winnipeg for many years, just over a decade. As I said, most of you do know this. Some of you for keeping up with my social media, and some of you who I know personally and who I've been, some close friends for some very long time, and some strangers, and some who just passed my page and, happened to look about it. But some really crazy things have happened to me, and I don't always speak on them, and I don't really speak up when I should. So I kind of just wanted to express how and what I've been feeling. As I mentioned, some of you might have noticed, I was away for a good month during the month of June. As mentioned, some could tell from my social media, as I've been posting daily, and from my last post that brought me to where I was. So I have this I used to have a red car. Actually, that one got stolen from the 7-Eleven in Brandon. This was a few years ago now. However, if you go to my Facebook page, you will be able to see it, and mostly what happened and how I recovered it. But apart from that, I was granted this orange car that I love. It's a Cobalt, and it reminds me of a car that I would have in high school. Rather, I didn't drive, for the longest time. I was always really scared of the winter conditions and roads and getting into accidents. I'm not sure what the trauma is with that, but for a very long time it took me trial and error to get behind the wheel. So I've really only been driving for a good 2 years now. I had this breakdown with several things happening time after time to me. So this is the past that I'm speaking of that really brought me to where I am today. I have lived with many different people, whether that's with family or rented different rooms and houses with other people. And like I said, it came to trial and error where I was rushed out of some of those places by either someone fighting me, physically attacking me, to the point where I thought my thumb was gonna fall off. This girl bit my finger off, or tried to anyway. So I was rushed out of that setting, that environment, and rushed into another one where this other chick had taken total advantage of the resources that she had. I was thinking that, she was assisted with rent and she was paying rent, and I was doing the same thing. I was paying my rent to her because when I moved into this place initially, the lease was under her name. And so, later on, obviously, it was brought to my attention that this wasn't happening. What I thought was happening was our rent being paid. I was working for a period of time there. I was able to fund myself, doing very minimalistic things, and caring for myself on a low budget. So I decided, obviously, I said I was rushed into a different place and setting and environment. So I decided, let me get a job in order to keep up with this rent. And like I said, it just blew up in my face. Oh my gosh, you guys should see how beautiful it is out here. with all the boats and pelicans and things like that. So anyway, off topic, it's easy for me to do that. But I'm ready to rant. So I'm in this new place, and I am working and things are going well for me. This is a new job, a new setting and environment, and it's landscaping, and it's like labored work. And anyway, like I said, things like blew up in my face, not for the first time, not for the second time, but time and time and time again. And I am informed that this rent wasn't being paid for months now, and hadn't just been a few weeks or a few months. It had been enough time for the landlord to contact me, who I didn't personally have contact information with in the first place. So he turns up to the door where I was, and this girl already had an idea about this happening, because all of a sudden there was no power in the place. In the apartment there was absolutely no power. So I was shocked, I was a little bit shooketh, because I was trying to do the little things like charge my phone, and like I said, it was one thing after the other. So this landlord ends up at the door with a notification, a sheet stating that we are being evicted. And I had, like I said, no idea of this until this very day. And like I said, I had just gotten this job. It was a seasonal job, and I had already been there for a few months, so I wasn't needing to be there for very much longer because it was seasonal. And they let me know, if you put in your hours worth, that I was able to get off for the winter season, because that was snow removal, and that was more like a man's job. So to my intention, I had it in my mind that I was going to be working this full season, and I would get let off with employment insurance. And that was all in my head, because at this very moment everything changed for me because of somebody else and their actions. So as this landlord shows up, I explained to him, obviously this girl has run off, because she's taking things out slowly but surely, within the days. And I'm obviously she's out and hasn't informed me, hadn't told me anything at all. She was staying at home all day every day, but to my knowledge she was a student. I'm not sure how that turned out for her, but obviously something very relatable to how the place turned out. So it seemed as though that she had exhausted all of her resources and just dipped out, just abandoned ship, and did not care who else was involved. So this guy has already been fed up with her. He did not care who I was and what my story was and what I had to say about finishing work, and maybe having to pay a few $100s to stay there for another week in order to let my work know what's going on, this, that, the fourth, the third. No, it just was not happening for me that way. So I was rushed out of this place. I didn't know what to do. I wouldn't have enough funds to find a place in that amount of time. It's actually super expensive to live alone, so that's something I never really done and never really considered, just because things worked out enough that I could budget and live with somebody else or rent with somebody else. So this guy was not having any of it. Like I said, he was already fed up and probably had heard enough, and probably had given us enough chances, which I wasn't informed on, but I'm sure that he was nice enough at the start. However, when it came to my side of the story and my time, it just wasn't that way. So he told me, it's not my issue, you have got to be out of here, since, like I said, this girl had already had some of her stuff out, and she had her boyfriend that was staying there, and I knew this initially moving into the place. She said she must have had him leave within the hour that I came to visit and view the place. And she said, you know, like, my boyfriend does tend to come here most days, and I didn't have an issue with that. Like I said, I was very used to living with multiple people, if not like a roommate, in order to survive and, you know, fund myself for all the things and activities I was always up to. So, and to fund other people as well, it turns out. So I'd already had like issues with that, because her and this boyfriend were like in the midst of breaking up. They were like not getting along and just fighting day after day, every minute, like anytime they were together. So all of a sudden he wasn't there and she wasn't there. So then, like I said, this landlord told me, like, you've got to be out of here like within a day or two, something like that, I remember. And like I said, there wasn't even anywhere that I could charge my phone. So this was already like shocking to me, but something that I had to, you know, try to get through one way or the other. So, you know, I kind of like broke down in all ways. Like, my last resort, I called my grandfather, you know, who I had stayed with, like my grandmother, my grandfather, the prior year, like the year before that, you know, when the pandemic had happened. It was the same thing. I just didn't know what was going to happen, what I should do, and just didn't have enough funding for myself to live on my own. And, you know, my dad thought the best thing for me to do was go and, you know, maybe help out and live with my grandparents. So at this point, you know, my grandmother, she's in home care, and my grandfather is living on the farm where he has been for as long as I know him. So, you know, I call him, because I assumed that it would be the same situation. If I had called my dad, he would end up calling my grandparents in order to, you know, sort something out like they're supposed to. And it's really like, you know, initially I would call my parents so that they can assist me with these things, give me guidance and let me know like what I should do. And since, you know, they've had years of experience of living. So anyway, it wasn't the case. So I called my grandfather, the source, and you know, like, he wasn't really sure what to do either. Like, it's modern day, and he's like, you know, he knows that you need to be working more than one job in order to survive, but he's not really living that life, so he doesn't necessarily know all the struggles and, you know, the relatables. So, you know, I said I have to get my stuff out of here. I had my bed. I'd already had a bed at my grandparents' storage, like in their basement, and, you know, a few other things. So I said, you know, like, I have some stuff there. I'm wondering if I could just store my stuff in your basement along with what's already there. Like, as I mentioned, my grandmother's in a home, and my grandfather has this whole house to himself, so he doesn't really go downstairs, but they don't want it being a mess with, you know, all of my stuff. Like, I'd accumulated a bunch of stuff from different houses, and like I said, I have been able to manage on my own, making my own money and buying whatever I wanted and needed. So, you know, after calling my grandfather and letting him know exactly what happened, like, it's also shocking to him. Like, he's wondering, like, what's going on? Like, how would this happen? Like, it's within a day. I'm like, I need to get my stuff moved. Okay, so I do that. And, you know, I remember him coming to get me, and we went and stopped for dinner, like, because I wasn't even able to make my own food without the power there at the house. So he took me, you know, and I remember having like Boston pizza and Brandon their salad. And we had a chat, and he was like asking me, like, do I know what I want to do, what I'm gonna do? Like, you know, this is like, I'm living day to day at this point, not knowing what's gonna happen next. And you know, I said, I don't know. Like, I had mentioned, like, I hadn't had enough savings and like funds to do anything really. So I thought, like, it has been years, like many years since I had seen my mother, like probably 20 plus years. So I'm like, you know what, if there's any way, like, obviously I had funds coming in, but that was the last of the check that I was like getting paid for the seasonal job that I was working. So I ended up like booking a flight to Trinidad, where my mother is currently living. And I had been talking to her, like I had been explaining things to her, like this was before all of this drama and trauma had happened to me, and she was almost like my therapist. Like, she could also not relate, but she had also obviously been through her own horrific things, and she's a woman as well, so she can relate to things to me to a sense. So I felt comfortable talking to her and explaining to her all these things that were happening to me, the events that were taking place. And she had told me, like, many months ago, like prior to that, like, you could come here and visit and you don't have to be working, like you could take your time, take a few months off. And like, she thought, okay, like this was in I want to say like the end of August of 2022, I believe. So of 2022. So it was, like I said, after the pandemic and things. So it was just like event after event, like year after year, like things just like crashing, tower moments, like just like the unknown happening, like just the things, like events like carrying on in my life. So she said, you could come here like for 3 months, like stay for Christmas and see what life is about here. Like, she's like, I don't have it easily, but she said, like, I'm at a point in life where I do have the assistance and the help. Like, I have a younger brother who's like 20 years younger than me, so she still has things to take care of. And I still do have 2 siblings, a brother and sister, who are in their early 20s in Jamaica living with my stepdad. So they're there, and like I said, she has things to tend to and her life to live and things to sort out still, as life is not as easy as she'd like it to be. So anyway, I booked this flight, like not even explaining anything to anybody. Like I said, it was just my grandfather that I was able to get a hold of and explain these events, like to get my storage like sorted out at least. So I tell him, like at this dinner, like I'll more than likely never forget it, like tell him I'm gonna take off to see my mother. And I did just that. I booked a flight, and I had been talking to my brother-in-law, who is a mechanic, and he's very helpful, and he kind of addresses things at that time and point, and he figures out a solution. So he was someone I trusted, and I had been talking to about a vehicle, because that's something I also didn't have for some time after having that red car stolen from me from my last job, where I just ended up quitting because I just didn't know what to do. Like, I just gave up on everything. I thought I'll just restart. I don't know when that'll be, but I did restart, and that's when I got that landscaping job, and like these events carried on and carried on. So he said, there are cheaper cars from auctions, and he said, I can help you out find a vehicle. However, it's going to cost this much. And I'm thinking, like, okay, I just booked a flight, and I really won't even have any money, no funds for my trip. However, I know I have a mother that I'm going to, and she spoke of being able to take care of me while staying there. However, she didn't realize I would have $0, like quite literally what ended up happening. So I'm like thinking, okay, maybe I'll still apply for employment insurance and hope for the best. Like, it's not my fault that I had to quit, like, but obviously nobody cares about that. Like, absolutely no one, including the government, obviously. But just like the boss was like, well, like, you kind of like quit before you left, and like that's no one's problem really but yours to sort out. And she thought, like, I don't think that, you know, you'll be getting funded like we talked about, you know, through the seasonal work, because there just aren't enough hours that you had put in and you quit. So I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm still hoping for the best. I still applied and left the country, which is also a no-no. But I was very honest about these things, and you know, my grandfather ended up helping me, assisting me. Like I said, I was like complaining and told him all these things that were happening, and he ended up granting me the dollars for that car, because the bank had not released also the funds that I got from the check. It just was like that and has been like that for a while, but I was also irritated by that. And so was my brother-in-law, who thought I would have those funds ready in my bank account, and, you know, where he could help me and get this car. He'd already purchased it and said, like, okay, this is the time to transfer the funds. So anyway, my grandfather helped me with that, and I was very happy, but I still ended up taking off to Trinidad. The trip was unforgettable, like, both good and bad. Just like, it brought me back to times when I lived in Jamaica with my mother, and like, she was living as a single mother, like trying and doing everything in her power to keep me alive. I felt so ill, like I couldn't eat. You know, usually I would love to go to the beach, like while I was in Jamaica, say, or anywhere else. Like, it's a hot place. That's where I expected to be. I packed like so many, you know, summer clothes, bikinis, and things like that. But I didn't even like end up going to the beach. I just felt so like ill. Like I said, it brought me back to traumatic times in Jamaica. And like, for her to fend for herself, she would have to leave me at home as a baby and lock the door and lock me in there. That's just like how it had to be. She didn't have no babysitter, no camera, no nothing like that to watch me while she had to go to work to fend for the two of us to be able to survive. So like I said, I do have a younger brother, but you know, he was being taken care of also by somebody else who would take him to school and things like that. Like, so I stayed home just by myself for the most time, just like in my head, just in a mental state where I just didn't feel energetic, and I didn't feel like I was of like wanting or needing anything. I just, like, I had lost so much weight. I was like as small as I was before I hit puberty, which was like almost impossible for me to get to at this point. But yeah, I had weighed like 120 pounds by the time I reached back home. I stayed there for 1 month, and as I said, like, the traumatic events just carried on. So my mother and I, we get along for the most part, but we hadn't had time to sit down face to face and have these conversations, and we finally did. We did in Trinidad, and you know, I ended up getting like just out of my mind, like just freaking out on her, like yelling at her, like things like that. I felt like she wasn't understanding me, when really it's like I'm not understanding her, right? Because she's obviously been through some life events that are worse than what I had been through. So, you know, I don't want to say I was being disrespectful, but I definitely got to an out of character moment. So yeah, I stayed there for a month, like I said, and I had even called. I was like, oh my goodness, like, I don't think I'm getting funded. Like, I just didn't have the money that I wanted, and just like everything was like crashing and towering and like just out of place. And I called the airlines, and I'm like, hey, like, can I go home earlier? And like I said, I hadn't told anybody. So like, I hadn't told my mom, my stepmother, and my dad, who lived together, and things like that. Like, none of my siblings had known where I was or where I was going, but obviously I ended up telling them while I was there, and they were also in shock. And you know, I ended up having to call the airlines just to see if I could go home earlier, because at the initial conversation my mom and I had while I was still here living in Brandon, she had asked, you know, for me to stay for the 3 months, but I had only booked a 1 month trip. And then while I didn't have the funds, I thought I'd be granted. I thought I would just stay only for a few weeks. So whatever happened in between me calling the airlines, they messed up my scheduling, or my itinerary, just something about the trip was very off. They told me like I would have to pay like for a new ticket or whatever, if I decided to go home early, which was something I didn't know. I didn't know things like that or recognize that they would, flag you or flag your passport or things like that if you called ahead of time or tried to adjust your flight. But that turns out that's what it was. I went to leave. I stayed for the entire month, but when I went to leave, it just was like something was off. They had flagged or just like did something with my itinerary while I called before, I called after I went online to check in, and it just wouldn't allow me. So I'm like, okay, like I'll just end up going early enough, like, which I showed up ample time. My mom made sure I was taken to the airport early enough, and like that wasn't the issue. The issue was me not speaking up for myself and thinking that I'd be okay. So I get there and I go to like check in, and on the, what do you call it, like kiosk, I mean, not even know what it's called, like really, but what the term is, but I went to check in and it just like it alerted me, like the same thing with the email, and it's like almost like as if I didn't have a trip, like I wasn't even there. So I'm like already like antsy, and I have like crippling anxiety. Like I start shaking and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I'm gonna cry, like I'm gonna freak out. I'm gonna have another freaking episode. So what I do is like go to the front desk, which is like normal, and I'm like, okay, like my flight is happening right away and I need to get my, like my suitcase on there along with myself, and I don't know how that's gonna happen in time because like the flight is taking off in like an hour's time, and you already know you need to be like checked in like prior to that. So I'm panicking. I'm almost gonna cry. Like I said, I'm like shaking, and people are like looking at me like, oh my gosh, is this girl okay? No, I absolutely was not. So the lady at the desk was like, yeah, like you can get on or whatever, like, but without your suitcase. And I'm like, that's like all the stuff I have. Like I said, everything else was in storage at my grandfather's. Like as far as I know, this is all I have on me, like from where I go, which was not back to my grandfather's. So I'm like, okay, I'm not sure how that's gonna happen because nobody's gonna send my suitcase off for me in any sense. Like she just means like leave my shit there. Like, sorry for my French. So she's just like why didn't you come up in early enough and this and that, like because they already knew, which was something I wasn't aware of, and they took advantage of that. So even the guard, like she was like seeming all suspicious, and they're like, I start taking things out of my suitcase and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put it in my carry-on. And so I start doing that. They're like, you don't have time to do that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to book another flight, obviously, because I don't have time to get on this plane. They're like, yeah, the time's over now and it's half an hour and we can't like allow you to go on because it'll delay so much and all this, like, so I'm worried, like I'm like crying kind of thing. And this guy had walked by too while I was in there and asked like if he could draw a picture of me or whatever, and like everything costs money, and I'm like, no, like it's okay. I had also had cash on me that I went to transfer like into, sorry, I can't think of the term right now, but yeah, I had cash on me that I want changed into Canadian. So all of a sudden, like everything about me is flagged, and like I noticed people are like, kind of watching me. Like I felt maybe as though maybe I was sketchy. Like I wasn't sure what it was, but something just was terribly off. So after that, I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, I don't have the funds to buy a whole other trip. Like I'm like, how am I supposed to get on the next flight? Like when is the next flight? And they're like, not till tomorrow. Like you can call your airline and ask them how you can get on a flight, and you're gonna have to buy another ticket and all this. And I was just like, this is a bunch of bullshit. So I like try and call my airline, which is like Airline Canada or whatever, and to get a hold of them, I was on hold for like about 2 hours, and the time is 2 hours before you can change your flight and not get charged, and just a bunch of BS that I couldn't get behind. So anyway, they end up, like I said, I had to go up to the desk again and tell them that my flight is like totally canceled and I have to buy a new ticket. So, I go to do that and they swipe my card. They take almost all of the funds I have in my account, robbing me of the money I had to get to where I needed to be. Yeah, so talk about crying and tower moments and trauma. So from that, I just couldn't believe, like, the girl took my card to the back and swipe it, and like she must have, I'm sure she tried swiping more than I had on there first, and then they got a good grand out of there. And she come back like, oh, like, yeah, your ticket's booked. And I'm like, oh, thank God, like that, right? So I'm, like I said, still looking sketchy with my suitcase. And I'm like, I go back like to take a freaking break, like just to get a mental clarity and just sit down for a minute. There's a Starbucks in there, and so I go and sit, and I can hear them, the baristas talking to like other people who are getting on flights, and because I see the guards watching me like from all corners, and I'm just like, something is unsettling about this. And turns out I was like, let me go check my bag before they make me stay here overnight, because that was one thing I just didn't want to do, like, was stay at that airport longer than I needed to. So they're like, yeah, there's a flight coming in, like, so I'm like, okay, that's it. I need to just check my bag in early enough because I don't need it, and sit there and wait my turn and like just relax. So I go to do that. And I don't know what made me check, but I checked my account, and that's when I realized they took the money that they needed to. So I went there and I'm shaking, like, because I don't even know how to ask them, like, why they robbed me, because I know, like, I'm not getting my money back. But I'm like, is this real? And he said, like, yeah, it is. And the guard standing there, like, she knows very well. And there's a guy that had been sitting over at the Starbucks with me, like, kind of area, and he come up there to do what he needed to. And you could tell he had a little bit of money on him. He had like gold chains and jewelry. And he said, like, he's like, while I was asking the front desk, like, did you guys double charge me and take my money? And like, he's like, there's nothing we could do about that. And the guy that I had seen earlier was there at the desk too, and he said even the guard was in on that. He like tried to tell me, like, like, they for sure did that too, and there's no getting it back, and that like those same people were the ones that were involved in it. And I just, like, my heart felt like broken, right? Like, I just couldn't believe that actually happened. So I'm like, okay, well, this ticket only gets me so far. It gets me to Toronto, and I need to be in Winnipeg after Toronto. So at that point, I wasn't even so much worried about it. I just was like, I couldn't wait to land in Canada. I remember waiting, in the lounge area too, and there was just like signs of people getting like trafficked, like, like stating, don't get involved in this and don't let trafficking happen to you. And I was just so afraid of that. Like, that just turned me the wrong way. Like, and it was nighttime by this point, where I'm waiting for my flight and waiting my turn, and everything just seemed so slow, and like I was like the focus, like the elephant in the room. So anyway, like, I finally get to Toronto, and it's not somewhere I've really been. I've only ever landed there, so I didn't feel comfortable enough even like staying there. So I remember just like talking to a front desk lady and telling her what happened. I know that like nobody's gonna feel like nobody's gonna pity me, and nobody's gonna really care. Like, they got their money, and that's how the airline is. So she did, however, like, consider my feelings, and like she heard me out, and she put me on a flight for free, and it was like right away to Winnipeg. So I was so glad for that. Like I said, my stomach, it was just turned off. Like, I couldn't eat. I was just upset to my stomach. And I remember landing in Winnipeg, and I had job offers in Brandon, because at this point I was like, I'm not gonna longer go any more time without any money. Like, I know how to get my funds. I've been getting it for how long, and I'm about to get it again. So I landed in Winnipeg, and my brother-in-law, he messaged me with the picture of that orange car, and I was just so thrilled. Like, when I say I was so happy, like, I had not had feelings like that in quite some time, because like I said, for one, I had not had the confidence to drive, and two, I just hadn't had my car, even like a car of my own, for long enough to appreciate wheels that get me from point A to B. So here I am with this car. My gosh, I was so happy. Like, that's already paid for, like, that's in my name, and now I could go and get a job. And I'm like, you know what, I can get paid more in Winnipeg rather than going all the way back to Brandon, where that didn't help me for the time that I was there. So yeah, I was offered. There was a guy that was doing the same fostering, that's home fostering for children. I ended up in this job that was for it was a fostering house. So we ended up in this like $500,000 house, which was so nice and different for once for me to be in like a spacious, clean, open house working. The amount that I thought I was going to be working. Once we got into the job, all that changed. They changed the amount that we got paid hourly, so that we'd have to work our hours and our years in order to get paid another 50 cents or 25 cents, whatever it is, and apply for plenty different positions within that time. Everything changed, but I still, I did also cry to start with, because those kids were involved in gang affiliated. They were high risk kids, like 5, which is the highest risk, and just like trauma related children, like put in just a house for hopefully someone to take care of, because their parents just didn't want to deal with them. So, I had a heart, like my heart was attached to this. Like, you get kids who, like I said, have trauma related things that happen, and like I felt the need to like get to know these kids right away and to help them in any way I could. I was also getting paid a good amount, I'm not gonna lie, but it just wasn't initially what they told us our start amount was. We started with one house and ended up with 13 all of a sudden, and over 100 children in our care. So yeah, I was involved with the like cultural aspect of that, like getting the kids to, their appointments, getting them eye care, getting them to doctor appointments, getting them in school, registered in schools, getting them, driving them. Like, we got funded for mileage, which was something that was also, great for everybody working there. And like all of a sudden, a lot of people started working there. They're like, hey, like pull me aside. Like, if you know of anybody, like let them know that they should try this job out and that it's great, yada yada. I did end up telling a few people, however it just didn't happen in their path. So I made a few different new friends and like moved into a nice place that had just gotten built, and like the rent was just amazing. Like, it wasn't overpriced, and like the people seemed to like want to get along with me, and just like it was spacious in there, and I was able to like cook and clean on my own time and like take care of my business while living there. And all of a sudden that changed. So the ad that I went to like live at turned out to be a different room, which was whatever, like to start with, but all of a sudden like I'm involved in people's business, like in a couple's business, something I just didn't feel the need, and something that I didn't think that I would be involved with. All of a sudden I'm in this story that I didn't expect to be in, and this job is turning out to not be exactly what I thought it would be, even though I just went along with it in order to, I thought what I would do was make enough to move on to the next chapter, the next story. However, it just didn't turn out that way. I ended up like being there for over a year and a half, And what happened was I was all of a sudden like stressed to the limit. Like winter happened, and when I say I get depressed, it is like an episode of depression. So I'm feeling super stressed out. Like people are not making their shifts, which we already worked 12-hour shifts to start with. I was working like with days after days, meaning like night and day. So I would work like, say like Christmas time, I worked 3 days in a row. Like I didn't go home, I showered at this house, like in order to be of assistance and keep these kids' lives going. And people, like I said, were falling out, like asking of me to come early into their shifts, like even though they asked for these specific shifts. And it was just annoying stuff that was happening time and time again. And I'm going to speak of my last shift there. Like I'll never forget it. I went thinking like it'll be okay. I messaged them like this was prior to me leaving. A few days prior to this, I messaged, we had group chats of all sorts of like management and different involvements, and I let each person I needed to know, each group chat and each whoever, upon me quitting, because I was planning of this, right? Like finally I had the confidence and the urge in me to just quit this job that turned out to not be working for me anymore. And they didn't really seem to take me seriously. So I suppose that's maybe why I wasn't taking myself seriously. I show up to my night shift and I came in early for someone, and I remember already speaking about boundaries and like teaching the children things like this too, where it became like a house thing that we spoke of. And I remember this guy coming and just invading in on that. We were a girl house, and for a reason. And he came and was just like intruded and like was asking, like these questions on why I'm quitting and things like that. And I was just super annoyed because he wasn't involved as he should be, and all of a sudden he was in our house, which was not a part of his job anymore. And it just, like I said, really annoyed me, and I felt like my boundaries were crossed enough for me to sit there for a while. We had one child. Usually we would have a house full, which is 4, and I had another girl working with me, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna walk out. Like, this girl can take care of the one kid and they can figure the rest out. Like, I had shifts lined up, and I was like, I tried to tell them already, and at this point, like, they can figure it out themselves, because that's what they were wishing and hoping for me, having to deal with these things that I shouldn't have been. So I got up and left. I left the shift. I got up and walked out, and the house owner and the director of operations, like, they messaged me, was like, hey, like, are you okay? Like, after the fact, like, obviously I was stressed out beyond stress, and just like had, like I said, crippling anxiety, and just the depression hit me so much harder this time, like around in the winter. I just was not about to put up with anything else, and I said, like, no. I replied to them like, no, there's nothing else you can do, like, just, I'm hoping I could just be done with that place. And sure enough, obviously that was fine. Nobody messaged me further about anything, and I just like was living. Like, I was at this place, this house also, where I felt like out of place. Like, this couple just like got me involved in their business and their like relationship, and they were also wanting me out as well, and I couldn't get out fast enough. There was another guy that was living in a room there as well. Like, it just was like uneasy stuff. So we both ended up having to leave because they said they were getting married, and like, which they didn't seem like they were gonna carry on with, but all of a sudden they were just gonna get married and call it a day, it seems. So they were having their parents move in rather than have them having housemates, than us being roommates, which was great for me. So I was able to leave, and oh my goodness, another thing happens. Like, this girl finds, like, she has an ad, and she takes straight advantage, knowing very well who I am without me knowing her. And you know, she went ahead and got, you know, other roommates in there. I went to her place like in the middle of the month, which was like the 15th, so I'd lived there with her for 15 days by myself, and like there were no issues. Like she was telling me to worry about myself, and she had a lease form that we signed, and I can agree on all of it. And she said, you know, if there anything that happens to the door code, she would change it if anybody knows. And I'm sketched out at this point. Like I'm like, I do not want anyone knowing where I live and where my whereabouts is, because people, like, I was having people stalk me, and I was like already just paranoid about things and just like in my own head, and just wanted the time to my own self, like for once. And what she does is she gets roommates in the downstairs area. She has a whole basement, and there was just a bunch of suitcases, and like it didn't click to me as like to why, but I remember asking her when we were sitting there signing the lease, and she's asking me if I have any, you know, if I have any criminal charges and things like that. Like this was just strictly for her to be judgy and just to know my business, rather than like her thinking about our safety. And you know, I was said to her like, oh, do you travel? Because she seemed very wealthy. Like it was just a huge house to start with, which I loved. Like it was spacious. Like I was looking to have my own time to breathe and get space and air. And you know, she spoke of her brother traveling, and she said like, oh no, I have a really close friend who's like a sister to me, and so you know, my brother travels and they get me all these things. Like I have sisters who's got me all these things. And I'm like, oh wow, like do you live on your own? And she said like, no, her and her mother lived together in that house, but her mother went back to India. So her mother is living in India for the summer, and she decided to make some cash for herself and have somebody live, you know, in the 2 rooms that were available. And I thought that's a really smart and good idea. Like, okay, like I could be a part of this. Like not really wanting so much to be in her business and know a lot about her, so that it was like vice versa. But she pushed my buttons. Like she had, like I said, these girls living, it was sisters living in this room, and her and I lived upstairs, and it was just a huge house. And like I said, the uneasiness of the suitcases that she had downstairs already like ticked me as like a red flag. And you know, these girls, we had little conversations at the dinner table, and you know, this woman, this landlord, ended up having cameras on us, which was already like a red flag, but also I can understand where she's coming from. I just got out of a place who also had cameras. My workplace has cameras for several different reasons, for you know, property, insurance and things like that, like things I can understand. But all of a sudden I'm like, that's just a red flag. Like they're making sure we sit around this table and having these conversations that I'm already like having weird thinkings about. And you know, sure enough, my thinkings seem to be precise, so it all crashed down. So I get up one morning, and this roommate is sitting at the table, and she has a black eye. And I'm like, I don't want to say anything, but I also am like very curious and worried about her well-being. So carrying on, the next night happens, and in the morning I walk downstairs and I see like footsteps of like man's shoes, and I'm just like, this landlord lady was not home yet. She likes staying home. She worked from home, but she thought that everybody else should be working outside and like getting their money, like, and hard working for it, even though we're all women and should be on the same like understanding and level, but obviously not in her mind. So she came in and she wanted a dramatic effect and reaction from me, so I gave her that. And I was like, I ran downstairs once I heard her come in and close the door, and I'm like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah. Like she looks like her eyes were like demonic looking, like they looked like emo. I'm just like, all of a sudden, like just like woozy and uneasy feeling, and I'm like, this is not good, like thinking in my head, but I'm like, I've got to figure this out somehow, and now I got to get out of here, and it doesn't matter if there's a lease or not that I signed. Like, this is not good for anybody that's living here. So sure enough, the days goes by, and like different activities happen with me having just like little conversation with those two sisters. So the one worked as a security and the one stayed at home. It looked like she was like cooking and cleaning for this lady, as like much as the house was already clean. Like, I'm not a dirty person typically, like I'll clean up after myself and then some, so it's not like the house needed to be tended to at all. But this landlord lady was just like on this girl's case. And all of a sudden I go to leave. The girls were making jokes at this table and I could overhear them, but they spoke a different language than I did even. And I went on my Instagram page and liked something, and it was very obvious it set her off and that she was watching my page just as much as I thought she was. And I went to leave. It was like late night, like 9:30, and I decided I'm gonna go to the grocery store. And she had given me a garage key, and like I said, there was code lock to get into the house. And it looks like this door is very hard to get in. When I first got there, like the day of, I had 2 loads to move from the house, and sure enough, I tried it out before I left for my second load, and I couldn't get in. The door was just weird, but I had the code. And so I had tried it enough times that I thought maybe I would set an alarm off. So I texted her to come and help me. She was inside and she watches the camera from inside too. One outside the house and one inside. So she comes and she acts all surprised and she said, "Oh yeah, you wouldn't want to have to not know how to get in the house, right? She said it happened to me where I had to call my brother because I didn't know how to get in the house. I was locked out of my own house." So it looks like she was trying that for the rest of the people that were living with her. So turns out she locked me out. Like I said, when I left the garage, she changed the door code to get in, and she locked the door to the garage in the house so I could get in the garage and sleep in my car, which I ended up turning my lights on. She wanted a show for the neighbors, so I made sure I pulled out of the garage. I called her so many times, as much as I texted and needed to. Like, I knew she was in the house and what she was pulling on me, so I just sat out with the lights on and me in my car. I wasn't sleepy. I didn't need to sleep. I was ready to stay up all night in order to figure out what it was that she was trying to do. So sure enough, by like 3 a.m. she comes out in her 90s and she says, "Oh, like, I didn't know you were trying to get in," like some BS like that. Like, I just had it. Like, I came inside and she's like, "Do you want to start over again?" Like, I'm like, let's talk about this tomorrow. Like, I would like to get my rest. Like, I do enjoy sleeping. I at this point need beauty sleep before I turn demonic myself. So yeah, I sleep for a few hours there and like get up, and only to hear that she locked the other girl out while she tried to leave and come back. She locked her out, and it was for an hour, where the neighbors had seen it and all this, right? So I'm like even scared to sleep, but I fall asleep during the nighttime, and for whatever reason it just struck me that she knew where these girls were and it wasn't at work. So I freaked out. I got up. It was early morning, like 7 a.m. and I'm like, where are the girls? Like, because at this time and point, the one girl is always at home. The one sister is always at home. I had mentioned one sister was a security guard. Well, this other one stays home, and if she, like, there's times where she goes out, but that's in the evening. Like, they're still very young, like early 20s. And this woman is like 35. And they had already spoken to her about having confidence, and it didn't seem like it was something that she had. She just wanted for people's lives to be as crappy as hers. And I freaked out, and I'm like, where are these girls? And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, are they in your room? Because I had seen the one girl, like I said, like, that's working for her, like making these meals, and bringing it up to her room. So I'm like, are they in there? Like, I was worried they were in the closet. Honestly, this point, I was just paranoid, and I didn't know what was happening, and I really just wanted to figure it out. So sure enough, I get into her room, like, because I'm like knocking on the door, and she like opens it, and I start like, I'm just like, what the hell, like there's got to be something happening. So she's like, I'm gonna call the police. I'm like, call them right now. And so yes, she calls the cops, and they come. There's a man and a woman, and she's giving them all my information, right? Like, okay, what about your first and last name? Like, I'm sure this is your house and property, but go off. So she tells them like, I'm causing trouble and all this, and I'm like, yeah, I am, like, and they're like, okay, like, is everything okay and all that? I'm like, well, now it is, right? And they're like, okay, like, are you okay to leave? And I'm like, I would love to leave, like, and be done with this. I don't want to be involved with a lease form and nothing in here, like. And they're like, okay, let us go talk to her. Like, so they're like, yeah, she's okay. She says she's okay with you leaving and you getting your refund back, like, because this was like in the middle of the month, and I had a security deposit there too. And they said that she'll refund you, and I said, I just want to be able to get my stuff. I know I definitely have 2 loads, and I would like to be able to get back in the house just to get my stuff and leave, and that's all. And they're like, okay, we'll ask her like if she's okay in order to let you do that. And she told them like yes or whatever, and she behaved obviously in front of the authority, and they were just like, she seems racy. And I was like, yeah, like, it's like she obviously has some like trauma that's in her, and like she literally needed like a therapist herself. But it's something I mentioned to her because like I don't think she was comfortable with men and with her own race. So she was acting very racist towards these girls that she had staying in there, because the girls asked me like, how did you find this ad? And just something in my head, like, I'm just like, how could it be? Like, why would this woman she's a woman, she's a lady. I can't even say a lady because she was acting like a kid, like a girl. And she's telling the police like there's 5 or 6 of them, and at this point I'm not even sure what all she meant, but it just had me like curious, and just all my red flags were going off, and it brought me to where I am today. Like I said, go off on so many different stories, but I've been through, like I said, so many different things, and some of them were very traumatic to me, and not everybody has the same life story, and not everybody can go through these life events and live to say that they did. And I just want to be able to do that for myself, and to release these traumatic things, and to express myself, to get my throat chakra opened, because it has been blocked for so long. I've been keeping in these things, and I've been keeping them to myself, and I just thought, what a better way to express it than to make a YouTube video about it, because some people can relate. There are some people out there that maybe have also related stories and events. So this is just me telling my side of the story. So after, the police came and assured me I would be able to get my things and leave, they also had left. And, the woman cop said to me, like, this is your car, like the orange one. And I said, yeah. And she said, I used to have one exactly like this. And like, that just put a smile on my heart. I was like, oh my goodness, like, good things are coming for me. So through all these life events, my car, if anything, has been the one material thing that I can say has helped me get from point A to B. So, they said, are you working? And I said no. And they're like, okay, like, you should be at home. So all I thought of, like, I had my grandmother's funeral like months prior to this. It was in March. And at this point it was about May. So, I was like, oh, like, I remembered my auntie, hugging me and saying like, if you ever need, you can come home. And I thought, like, this is one of those times, like, again, like, look at me, I have to do this, like, I don't know what else I'm gonna do. And like, I don't have the funds to be able to survive on my own, so what am I gonna do? I resorted to going home. I packed my car, and I gave my grandpa a call, but I didn't tell him that I was coming, so that was a surprise and shock to him. So he also expressed that while I showed up unexpectedly to his house with like a car full of my stuff, and he was just like, what are you doing? Like, what the heck? And I'm like, yeah, I'm here to stay. Like, I have nothing else to do. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, these things happen. And he's like, oh my goodness. Like, he's like, Talivia, what is going on? Like, all of a sudden he's just like freaking out too. Like, he has nothing, he doesn't know what to do, because like I said, I've also been in a similar situation to this, except for he was more aware. This time he wasn't. I caught him by surprise. And I just was like, in my head, I started, like, that evening I started drinking. I said, like, I'm just so tired and I haven't even eaten. And he made me like a burger. Like, he had some dinner just before I got there, and he made me a burger, and I sat at the table and ate it. And like a few hours carried on into the evening, and I started drinking Alexander Keith's, the canned ones. And then I just started getting in my ways. Like, I was just like, someone is gonna feel my pain. So the closest person was my grandfather, who was sitting in the next room watching TV, and it was late. It was like 11 p.m. and I just wanted to get him going. One thing after the other, I just kept saying to him, I just was like, this is how I'm feeling, so I'm gonna make him feel the exact same way. And he was just like, the same thing with the funds. He's like, I'm not gonna like be giving you like grant you any money if you don't know what you're doing, type of thing. And I'm like, that's what I need to get to where I, the next level, the next step is to not stay here. And I guess he just didn't know what I was doing, so he wasn't gonna grant me any extra funds. So anyway, I took off in my car that night while I was drunk, and I sent like consecutive text messages, like one after the other. And I was texting my sisters, and I was like texting like my stepmother, and like texting my dad, and like just letting all these things out, and just like texting one after the other. And like my oldest sister, like days already like before this, while I was locked out of the place, I was like, something is going on, and I was just like going off. And she was just like, you need to check yourself into a mental house like tomorrow. And I was just like, it's got to be that, because like I don't know what else to do. And so like I said, I like headed home and was driving like late night, and these like photos and videos all captured on my Instagram of me. Like, I got stuck. And when I say only God got me out of there, like got me unstuck, I can't even like express and tell the story about that. That'll have to be for another time. That's a time in my life where I could say only God. Like, I believe in God, creator, Jesus, the universe, whatever you call it, whatever you refer it to as, but I believe in a higher power. Took me out of where I was stuck, and I took myself to the highway and parked there, because my car could only go so far. It was shaking. Like, whatever happened, I could only, like I said, get so far. And I parked on the highway, and my dad, sure enough, like the next morning, I was like baking, I was marinating in my car. Like, my armpits smelled so bad. I was like sweating so bad, like, and I only had so many like changes of clothes in my car, and I was wearing like this silk top that was long sleeve, and I just remember like drenched in sweat. And he came, and he's like, wait here and I'll be back. And he went to get me a McDonald's bagel and hash brown, and came back, and like he honked his horn like I was honking my horn the night before at their house, so I knew it was him. And I got in, and he said, like, honey, I don't know what else to do, like something along those lines. And we drove down back roads, and he took me to Brandon from Nipah is where I was parked, and he met with my sister Samantha there, who assisted him to take me into the psych ward. I went to Emerge first. Actually, I went to the cop shop. I wasn't shocked or surprised by any of this. I knew that at some point I had needed mental assistance. I needed to be verified that what I was going through wasn't normal for everybody. And sure enough, the police asked, like, is this your sister? And I said, yeah. Like, I was sitting with Samantha, and she was asking me, like, do you know, like, what brought you to this spot, how you got here today, and what events, like, brought you here? And I'm like, trying to explain to her, like, from my past, like, when I was, like, underage drinking and, like, things like that. And she's like, no, I'm talking about today. And I'm trying to let her know that, like, there were past events that added up to today's events, but she just wasn't really hearing me. And so it wasn't even the time and place to speak on that anyway. The police just asked me, like, this is your sister, okay? Like, I'm gonna take her into emergency. And that he did. And I sat in that room. I had my robe on because, like I said, I wasn't, like, equipped with clothes that I would necessarily wear to a cop shop. So, like, my girls were out in this, like, silk top that I had on, and I was sweated out, and so I put my black robe over it, and I was sweating even more. I remember just, like, smelling and thinking, like, oh my goodness, whoever has to wash these clothes, like, I feel bad for them. But anyway, I did end up staying in the emergency for quite a few hours there, and just, like, explaining myself, and they were telling me of the events that led up to that, which was me texting my family members, like, this and that and the third. And they're all very nice people because it is their job to listen and hear you out, and they're not judgmental. And so that was nice to get off my chest. And one thing led to the next, which was from the emergency I was taken to like I said, the psych ward, which were places I had never been before. So I stayed in the adult psychiatry in Brandon for about a month, and I was able to express how I was stuck in a psychosis in the wintertime, where I did not know who was there for me, who could understand me. I thought that everybody was after me, like, wanted the worst for me, because that was what was happening to me. It was this, as if someone was preying on my downfall, as if, like, someone had been sending evil eye, like, wanting, like, maliciously, like, just, like, obviously we go through highs and lows, and there are tower moments that happen if things aren't going the way they should be, because we all have a life story, and not all of us have the same story. But I was able to express these to these doctors, to these psychiatrists, to these professionals. And I also had some time in there while I was in with so many different personalities, and some of these people I made friends with, and some of them came and left. Like, there are some people that had I guess their story is they've been in there for some time, and they do go in there for some time, like, from time to time. And I got to relate to some people, and also, like, hear their their stories that were also very different from mine. And I was able to take time to myself to relax, and to finally get in a state where I can sleep. I got medications. I'm currently still on them, but they made me feel a certain way. Like, I hadn't, like, smoked weed in a very long time, but they made me feel very, like, light and almost, like, in a high sense. So like, now I don't really drink. It's not something to say, like, I won't drink, but I want to say in the past I was a functioning alcoholic. I was able to drink almost every day and continue with my day-to-day activities, like working 3 jobs in one day, and never sleeping, like having bags, like visible bags under my eyes. Just dark times led me to where I was, like, to finally just relax. It was like the last resort, but I was able to resort at least to something and feel like free enough to be myself. I still had my explosive moments, and those meds were there to also help me to ease my mind. And I felt like I was in, as funny as it sounds, like a retirement home. There were all ages, all different personalities in there, from grandparents age, like, to retirement people, to like 19 years olds, like I said, people who I could relate to, and also who had totally different stories than I did. And it was finally just, it was nice to come to these senses and to realize, like, I wasn't alone, and that it was okay to have those feelings and those emotions, and and that those things did happen to me, and that like, come to the conclusion that I was stuck, and that I was in this, like, different state of mind, and that I could be freed of that by simply, like, I want to say, turning myself in, like, to, like, be verified pretty well. Like I said, these are professionals, so I didn't feel like they were judgmental, or that they were, out to get me and things like that. But there definitely were different personalities, and different peoples of all ages. So obviously everyone's not going to get along at all times, but there was a time there, like, for a good month, I was able to, like, finally relax. I was able to sleep up until it wasn't beneficial for me, right? Like, my skills were getting buried. I was losing my skill sets, because as much as it was nice to have your meals made for you and brought for you, all we did for ourselves was do our laundry. So there were, like, different life skills that I was losing, I would say. So after the month, like, I was released from there, and this is where I'm at now. I'm back where I was, like, during the pandemic days, where I stayed with my parents. I'm looking to get my own place now. Like, I've always lived with people, whether that's roommates or with family members, paying rent and things like that. I'm here now, like, finally able to be free on my own, and I've just started a cleaning business of my own. I did get some sorts of government funding, so I'm able to venture off on my own and live, like, just by myself, not having to be involved in anybody else's lifestyle, or worry about anything else but myself, which is really nice. I know a lot of people can't say that, and a lot of people my age have children to look about, where I'm in a different life set, and I don't have anybody else to worry about but myself, and I'm really grateful and thankful for that. And I just really thought that this was a good way to express all the things that led up to where I am now. And I just want to let whoever is watching know that things can change, and will change when you want them to. And any and everything is possible, and that's why my name is what it is. My handle, my coconut dream, is what coconut dream is. I believe in my dreams, and I will set out to do any and everything that I need to in order to be who I am and want to be. And I'm enjoying the beach, like I always do, almost like every day, which is something, like I said, is on my bucket list and my dream list of living. I love the beach, and it's something that I could do every day this summer, and I'm very thankful for that, with winter approaching. Well, as mentioned before, like and share the vibes. And if you've gotten this far, I thank you and appreciate you, and there is more to come, so stay tuned. Ciao.